sit down, can I have you take up the offering, please? Okay, if there's dust in it, God's not in the dust too, so I mean. And we're not even going to go over the story of Washington and Abraham Lincoln talking. But we have 30 minutes, and I've come prepared with a notebook and notes, so we're all in trouble, right? No, but we've been talking about becoming a Pentecostal powerhouse. What do we mean by that? Well, we all know what I mean by that. But just to reiterate, somebody who goes to the gym, we're basing it upon somebody who goes to the gym, who works out, who's trying to get in shape. And while they do that in the physical, we can do the same thing in the spiritual. Now, we may not go to the gym and physically lift weights to become a better prayer warrior, or we might not go to the Golden Corral to become a better pastor. But the concept is that if we're going to become a Pentecostal powerhouse, somebody who's mighty in the things of God, then we're going to have to work at it. It's going to take practice. We talk about the importance of faith. And what is the enemy of faith? Doubt. We look at the Word of God. The Word of God clearly states that doubt is the enemy of faith. We love to use the illustration and the account of Jesus coming out of the wilderness and talk about spiritual warfare and demons, and talk about how there are some that don't come out but by prayer and fasting. Well, that's absolutely true. But if we step back before Jesus rebuked the disciples and said that this kind don't come out by prayer and fasting, what's the reason he rebuked them for and said the demon didn't come out? Because you doubted. And then he went on to explain. From faith, we jump to prayer. Because prayer is the most unutilized weapon in the Christian arsenal. People do not know what it is to really pray anymore. And in all honesty, probably if we pray over our food, 9 times out of 10, unless we make a conscious effort, we're just going through the motions. God bless us, let's buy. Amen. And we don't take into account the seriousness of it. I'm getting ready for this morning, so I'm not there in my notes, but I can't remember who it said it was, but they said it, I think it might have been Ravenhill, a man who is intimate with God will not be intimidated by man. What is that? That is a person who knows what it is to pray, who gets closer to God. From prayer, we couple it with fasting. If you really want to see God move in a situation, then we'll fast. Why do we fast? Because we are putting down ourself, not as a bad self, don't do that again, but putting this down, suppressing our will to take on the will and seek the will of the Father. It is sacrifice. It is showing God our dedication to that situation. God, I need you to move in this situation. It shows him our seriousness, our earnestness to see him move in ways that we could never dream or imagine. We used examples from the past. We talked about John Knox, who Mary Queen of Scots said, I fear the prayers of John Knox more than all the armies in England. Yes, she feared the prayers of John Knox, but what does that tell us? That more than likely he was not just a man who knew what it was to pray, but he was a man who knew what it was to fast, to get a hold of God. Moving on today, and I'm farther back in my notes than I thought, but last week we began talking about the armor. And what's one thing we know about our armor from 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 4? 2 Corinthians 10:4. What is one thing that we know?
The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down strongholds.
So the weapons of our warfare are what? They're not carnal. What does that mean? They're not fleshly. They're not tangible. It's not me whipping out a sword and saying this is literally the sword of God. They're not carnal. They're not fleshly. But they're mighty to the pulling down of strongholds nonetheless. What does Ephesians Ephesians chapter 6, verses 11 and 12 state. Ephesians 6, 11 and 12. And we're going to be focusing on these two verses for the remainder of Sunday school. Ephesians 6, 11 and 12.
Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
So we are commanded to put on the armor of God. How much of the armor are we commanded to put on? All of it. The day and age in which we're living, that is not a popular gospel. We are to put on the whole armor of God. All of it. That's like going into a church that believes blab and grab and say, we need to put on the whole Word of God and go by it. We are living in a day and age where there are lots of preachers, lots of teachers, and lots of churches that are picking and choosing what parts of the Bible they want to believe and what parts they don't want to believe. They are picking and choosing whether or not heaven's good exists, but hell doesn't exist because we don't want it to go someplace bad. Or we want to have all the good things of God, but we don't want to do the work of it. And sometimes we're guilty of this too. We expect $1 million answers from 10-cent prayers. When we have not paid the price, when we have not found our place in prayer and showed God our earnestness and need for it, and how badly we need to see Him move in a situation. But we are living in a day and age where they don't want the whole gospel. They only want to pick and choose. I mean, we could probably not have to travel far and we'll find a church that might say it's all right to drink, or homosexuality is all right. I mean, we have to adapt with the times, or they might start having secular dances in the church to get the young people involved. And they're trying to win the world through worldly means. The full gospel of Jesus Christ is not a popular message in the day and age in which we're living in. But we don't get to pick and choose. We need to take the whole Bible. When it comes to Judgment Day, God's not going to judge you on what you picked and what you liked and what you didn't like. He's going to judge you by everything. And when it comes to the armor, we don't get to pick and choose which pieces we want. And really, if we did, we are vulnerable Christians. And I mean very vulnerable Christians. What do I mean by that? Why do we have to put on armor in the first place? What's armor used for? Protection. Protection from whom? Protection from that person who loves you so much and will do anything from you. It's from your enemies. It's from the devil. Modern warfare. They didn't put on breastplates of leather and metal and chainmail, so when you got jabbed in the short, when you got jabbed in the short, small, open areas that you didn't bleed, they didn't put it on for fun and giggles. They didn't go out and play tag in their armor. They put it on for protection. We put our armor on for protection. Why? Because we have an enemy. Is that anything new and revolutionary? No, it's not revolutionary. It's nothing new. But we have an enemy. We found that in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. We don't have just one enemy, but we have several enemies. He said, but we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. There's one. Against powers. There's two. Against rulers of the darkness of this world. That's three. Spiritual wickedness in high places. That's four. So we have an enemy. What does Colossians chapter 1 and verse 16 state? Colossians 1:16.
By him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions, principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him.
Thrones, dominions, principalities, powers. Do those sound like anything that were just mentioned in this verse? God is saying that He created everything. And we have an enemy. Probably the most famous enemy that we have is found in Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 2. Ephesians 2 and verse 2.
During the time past, you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience.
Okay. Let me get my nice little drawing out. Okay. So, who's our enemy there? What's the title given to him?
Past,
What's that?
time past?
Not times past.
What did you just ask? Like,
The enemy listed. What's his title?
oh, title, I thought you said time.
No, not time.
Prince of the power of the air.
Prince and the power of the air. Here on this nice clean board, we have a perfect circle. If you don't think it's perfect, then we need to pray for you today. And this perfect circle, you want to take a guess what it represents? This could be anything I've seen. This is going to represent all eternity, and that's going to represent now. No, that's not going to represent now. This here is earth. It is earth. This physical earth. It's the world. It's perfectly round, right? Thank you, brother. I have one on my side. But this represents the earth. Now, we have an enemy. He's what? What's the title given?
Power of the air.
Oh, we'll talk about that in a little bit, brother. I'm trying to display a nice little picture here. But from this verse, he's the prince and the power of the air. The Greek word for air in the Bible, not the King James speed because that's in English, but the Greek word that was translated there was taken from the Greek word aero. A-E-R, I think. Oh, somebody tell me to write that up. Yeah, A-E-R, arrow. And when we look into the word arrow, it means this, breathable air. Breathable air. Remember if we go back to Genesis chapter 1, and we can study through the Bible how there's different heavens, the heaven in the air, heaven in the sky where the stars are, and heaven where God resides. This is air. So we get that he's not just the prince of the power of the air all the way up into space, but arrow, so he's into breathable air. Turn this way now. So we have the devil, who is, we'll call breathable, because we all know that you can go so far into the atmosphere, and you can't breathe anymore. The air's too thick. So this is breathable air. So if that's earth, he's the prince of the power of the air. Now what do we know about demons? If we do a study on demonology, we know that hell is in the middle of the earth, with that nice little round circle that connects at all points, and goes on forever. There are angels that are chained in hell for their crimes. We get that from Jude 1:6 and 2 Peter 2:4. We know that somewhere on earth there's a bottomless pit. We'll call it a BP. No, it is not British Petroleum. It is bottomless pit. We get that from Revelation 9, 1 through 11. They have a leader, a demon, a Abaddon, Apollyon, whatever you want to call him. If you want to be Hebrew, call him Abaddon. If you want to be Greek, call him Apollyon. I don't care which one you choose. We're grafted in, so we'll call him Abaddon. So we know that these are down here. They're not doing anything, but they are there. These will be released later in life, but not now, during the tribulation period. So right now we're dealing with breathable air. The devil's there. And if we come back to Ephesians chapter 6 that we've just taken from, verse 12, if we look at this, Paul gives us, basically he's laying out the hierarchy of the demonology world. When it comes to the devil's setup, well, let me back up. Do we have hierarchies in this world? Do we have systems? Absolutely. There's the head of the United States, the president. Who's next in charge? Vice president. Then there's the cabinet. And then it goes down, down, down. If we break it down into a church level, you have the pastor. You have the council. You have the Sunday school teacher. And then you have the lay members. Where did we get all that from? We get that from God. God has a hierarchical system for the angels in heaven. We know that there are archangels, which are being translated, does anybody remember? Whoa. Chief angel. When we get into this system, that's exactly what we're seeing here. The devil's doing exactly what he does with everything else. He is stealing God's system. So he has it listed down. And the very first thing he lists is principalities. And when we look at principalities, I'm trying to find my notes here. I said I don't have a lot of notes, but I know what I'm talking about. But when we look at principalities, we have the layout of the chief system here. And when we study principalities, but principalities mean exactly this: chief angels. When you look at somebody in charge, does he do everything that needs to be done? No, it's not possible. I say it's not humanly possible, but it's also not humanly possible or angelically possible. They delegate it. Yes, exactly. But if he's in charge, if you're in charge of something, sometimes you have people under you. And you
say Michael, he was sort of like a battle angel.
Exactly. They have certain
Gabriel, he was more like a
messenger, even though he did fight too. But they were chief angels in heaven.
Yeah.
When we look at the devil's kingdom, the principalities are chief angels. That's exactly what they are. So they are the ones over them. Now, I'm not saying they're the highest, but to a degree, they are. When you study it out with the word principalities, the word used there actually means chief. Then we have powers. And they are the ones that are delegated to. Give me a quick moment. I might have to back up with my notes and go back and forth. But regardless, when we talk about the thrones or dominions, we get a little bit more insight into it. Because when we look at thrones and dominions, they refer to a stately seat or a chiefly seat or a seat of power. We find that taken from Acts chapter 7, verse 49. If someone will please read Acts chapter 7, verse 49.
Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. What house will you build me, saith the Lord, or what is the place of my rest?
Read that one more time, Mom. I got distracted with my notes.
Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. What house will you build me, saith the Lord, or what is the place of my rest?
The Greek word for heaven is kyrinos. It is the exact same word that is used for thrones. So it's translated. So we know that their chiefly seat must be somewhere, possibly in the heavens. And I did say possibly. So then we have thrones somewhere up here. And then we come to spiritual wickedness in high places. When we start looking at the translation for that, we'll find in the King James Version, and let me turn there. If I'm not mistaken, that word places is actually italicized. Am I wrong with that? And it would help if I got to the right book. Yes. When you look at your King James Version of the Bible, in verse 12, the very last phrase is spiritual wickedness in high places. See how that order is italicized.
We don't know where you're at.
Ephesians 6:12. I'm sorry. Ephesians 6 and 12. Ephesians 6 and verse 12. Notice the last word, places. See why italicized. Italicized being slightly slanted over. It's not like the other print. When we start studying the history of the King James Version, and this is why we adhere to the King James, Old King James, and not any others, because they were so meticulous in the translation that they want to make sure that they were not reverting the Word of God in any way. But in the original Greek, that word places was not there. They added it to give us a better understanding. Anytime they added a word to give us a better understanding, to complete the phrase, they italicized it to prove to the reader that it was added and to show that it was added. And so they wouldn't be taken off course. But when we look at the Greek phrase there, for spiritual wickedness in high places, we find that it is actually the Greek word eporanios, E-P-O-R-A-N-I-O-S. And what that means is this: above the sky or celestial. So we have breathable air around the earth, and we have thrones and dominions higher than that. But spiritual wickedness in high places, spiritual wickedness each place. They're anywhere between the breathable air and wherever heaven begins. We just know it's somewhere between there. So when we look at the earth, the thrones of the enemy are all around it. From outer space where the stars are to the air that we breathe, the enemy's around us. And we're coming to a point. In Revelation chapter 17, I want to say, we know that there are 3 spirits that go out. 3 frog-like spirits. Those are demons. We know that there are 3 other demons mentioned in one of the smaller apostles. Lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, pride of life. So we have demons walking around the earth. We know that there's a lust demon. I think it was Lester Summerall I was reading after. It's been many, many moons, and I've only ever found this phrase one time. But the author made the statement that when you look at an idol, the reason the idol looks the way it does is because some demon revealed itself to an artist many centuries ago, whenever it was first created. And that's how the artist saw the demon and it was portrayed. Now, if we get into demonology a little bit, you realize that if we trace the gods present to way back then, that they look exactly the same. What do I mean by that? If I mention Poseidon, you all should probably have a vivid image of what I'm talking about. What does Poseidon supposedly look like? Is he completely fish? When your average person thinks of Poseidon, thinks part fish, part man. Top half man, bottom half fish. If we would move on to the future, the Romans stole that god, called him Neptune. You realize that we can trace him all the way back in the Bible to 1 Samuel chapter 5? In the temple of Dagon. And what did Dagon look like? Half man, half fish. The gods don't change because that's the demon. The demon actually exists, so the god never changed. That's exactly what he looked like. If we go back to Roman or even Greek mythology, there's 12 main gods. So now we've got at least 12 main demons on the earth. Or I should say 12 other demons now roaming the earth. If we get into Hinduism, there are more gods than there are people. So now we have multiple demons running to and fro on the earth. Just because we don't see them, don't mean that they don't exist. Demons are around us all the time. The witch at Endor, what did she bring up? A familiar spirit. Why are they called familiar spirits? Because they're familiar with that person that they were following. That's who they were following, and they know them. They know what they like, what they didn't like, what they did. So we step back, you realize demons know what you like, what you don't like, where you go, what you do in public, what you do in private, what you do that no one else knows. They are familiar with you. So why do we need the armor? Because there are demons everywhere. And they are constantly under attack. And they are constantly attacking us. You know, we're not just up there just with a shield. A shield isn't going to protect you from everything. A shield's not... Why do they put on the whole armor all the way around them in war times? Why does it go all the way around, not just in the front? Because you're not always being attacked from the front. Sometimes you're being attacked from the sides. Sometimes you're being attacked from behind. Sometimes you're being attacked from underneath. Sometimes you're being attacked over top. And sometimes you're being attacked from all the sides at one time. Why do we need to put on all the armor of God? Because there are demons that are out to take us down every opportunity that they can. The Bible states that the devil, he is a schemer. We find that in chapter 6 of Ephesians and verse 11. Put on the whole armor of God. Why? That she may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. That word wiles translated into the original language literally means trickery, deceit. How do you catch a mouse? You put a trap out, but what do you put on the trap? You put bait. I mean, personally, I don't use cheese. I use peanut butter. Because it seems that they like it a little bit better. So when cheese is not going to work on you, the devil's going to put peanut butter out there. He's going to put out what's out there to lure you. He's going to put a trap out there to trick you, to deceive you. He is a schemer and a plotter. And he waits for you. We get that from 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. If someone will please read that. 1 Peter 5:8. He's walking around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. But what's he doing? He's waiting. He's lying in wait. He's looking to see whom he may devour. If you're going to go against somebody and let's say you want to devour him, if you're hunting, I could probably ask Pat how many deer he jumped out in front of him with the gun pointed directly at his head and said, I'm here to take you hostage and kill you and eat you. And they all were just there blanking and said, okay, that sounds good to us. We'll jump right in the freezer in the back. We'll even gut ourselves. It doesn't happen. You have to wait. And you have to wait for them to come. The devil lies in wait to see what's going to work on each one of us to take us down because everyone's different. Everyone has different weaknesses. And he's seeking whom he may devour. He's watching. He's waiting. If you're trapping something, you might put one bait out one time, and it's not effective. So what do? You lie in wait. You check it out. Okay, well, let's try this bait. Ever talk to a fisherman